Hello, everyone. This is a pre-podcast message from Bennett. And I can already tell what you're thinking. If I'm giving a pre-podcast message, there's probably bad news. And I can't tell you that you're wrong. There's bad news. So, Daniel and I just got finished recording an episode, and this was another walkabout episode on my part. So I was walking around outside. Unbeknownst to me, and I know, believe me, I'm more annoyed than you are. Last time, there was an audio issue where the gain, it was like this auto gain feature, so the volume was all over the place, and it was a headache. Well, this time, I turned that feature off, and I have the gain constant. And I tested it, and it worked, and it was great. And we started the podcast, but now there was some kind of weird popping noise continually happening. It was like lightning was striking the microphone continuously. My audio on my end is just garbage. Total garbage. You can't even really hear my voice. So, needless to say, this was very frustrating for me. But it was a great podcast, I thought anyway. Daniel's audio recorded it on his mic fine, so we have his half. My half is garbage. I don't want to throw this episode out totally, so I'm going to do something kind of weird with this one. And, maybe it can be its own funny thing that I hope never happens again. But here's what I'm going to do to try to salvage this. I'm going to try to listen to Daniel's half of the audio and re-record my half of the audio, which I know is preposterous because it kind of defeats the whole point of third space, which is to be in the same, this new conversational space where conversation is happening fluidly, and here I am not even talking to a person live. It's not an ideal solution. That's the best I got, unless you want to hear lightning strikes for an hour and 45 minutes, which I don't think you do. So, since I just had the conversation, I remember how it went. It is me. I am giving my reaction. I'm remembering what we talked about a little bit. It's going to be strange, but I hope that it's still entertaining. This is the only thing I can think of to salvage the episode. So, not ideal. We'll have to do another episode in another couple of weeks. And maybe I'll ditch the walkabout podcast idea and stick with the mic that I know works. Really annoyed about it. Apologize that this one's got to be a strange podcast, but maybe the silver lining is that it can be entertaining in its own way, and you can laugh at me trying to act as myself, and I'm no actor. But if I can pull off any role, it's the role of me. So without further ado, I will let Daniel and some weird future version of me kick it off.
It's the podcast.
No, wait, stop. Hold on. Stop. I thought we went through this.
You did stop me last time. I just think I haven't given you the perfect one yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I assume this time you prepared? You made some preparation?
You know what?
Going to give a stellar performance?
You know what? Maybe you have a point, and I should prepare a little more. So that when I do lead with a little jingle, you just believe in me, and it'll be really good. But I'm not gonna tell you this one's gonna be good. But I started with it's the podcast instead of third space, and
that's true.
Yeah, could have gone somewhere. My thought was that eventually it will go somewhere. We'll land organically on a jingle, and it'll just be something we use. But no such luck so far.
Well, I do believe in you. I have faith that you'll do it in the future. So
yeah.
One day we'll get there. Our closing jingle is already just about perfect. So we've got that one down at the very least.
We need something other than hello.
Good day, sir.
How are you?
How are
Fine
you?
Weather we're having.
Hello.
Salutations. I do have two random small things on my mind. They're disparate things. They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay.
And I just wanted to ask you, have you been getting an inordinate amount of spam calls or texts or, because of the approaching election, presumably? I don't answer them, but the texts and even surveys and things that I'm getting are just off the charts. I'm talking 7 or 8 a day of spam phone calls. Text maybe once a day on average, because not every day, but some days I'll get 2 or 3. Right. And I was just wondering if you've had this experience.
Yeah, I have been getting a few more texts and calls than normal. Although I will say it's been mostly, it was back more in September, towards the end of September and beginning of October. I was getting more calls, spam calls, and then a few texts, political texts. The spam calls, I never answer those.
I never answer them too. Why do you think people have different approaches? Some will like maybe play a prank on them. Some will call and then say, put me on the do not call list. Is that even a thing? It feels like it's an urban legend. Like they have to. It's like if you ask a cop if they're a cop, they have to say yes. These sorts of things that are like, is this real or is this just something people say?
It's real. The do not
call list.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing, and but I think it's like a federal.
It just reminds me of Michael Scott's bankruptcy. I declare bankruptcy. Like I'm sure you can get placed on a do not call list, but it probably involves something more than telling the marketer or whoever's calling you, like, put me on that list right now. Yeah. Right now, I tell you.
Yeah, you don't tell the marketer. That's for sure.
I declare do not call. Weird.
No. You don't tell the marketer. There's like a federal do not call list, and they handle it. I don't know how it works, but I think it's your landline actually that they do. The federal do not call list is for landlines, not cell phones.
Oh God, your landline? I mean, give me a break. That's so antiquated. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it with cell phones.
But I think you're right. Like.
And then, I mean, it's not like the people who, call and spam you, the robots or whoever they are, it's not like they're obeying some kind of do not call list. It's kind of like that same problem, the same problem that you have with laws and crime. It doesn't matter what laws you put in place.
Right.
The criminals, they're still gonna break the laws. You got to deal with that with these spam callers. They're not gonna abide by some do not call list.
Particularly when it's an innocuous. But what's the end result here? Let's play this out. So you call people, they answer, and then what? Is this to get their information? Say, I need your credit card information, and 1 in 10,000 does it. But hey, at the end of the day, you're getting 4 or 5, credit card informations or social security numbers or whatever. Like, what's happening with these calls?
Yeah, I imagine that some of it is it's phishing. Yeah. It's phishing attacks. People trying to get information, but a lot of times when I get the calls, it's just dead silence. It's silence on the other end, and it's nothing. And so, I don't understand what's happening when there's just dead silence on the other end of the call. What's going on there? Although I will tell you, I have a theory about that. I don't really understand exactly what's going on, so I could be totally wrong about this. But a lot of times, sometimes you'll get a spam call, and the number will be a number that you recognize. At the very least, it'll be from your area code or something. But it's a number that you recognize, and I wonder if what's happening when you get the dead silence calls, if there's not some kind of technical voodoo going on where they're trying to they call you, and then when you answer, they use whatever connection is going on there, and they use that connection to then spam someone else with your number, so that they think that it's you or something. I don't know if that's really what's going on or not.
Okay, so I've never had it say Bennett is calling and it not be you, but I've had it be a number that say resembles mine and is changed by 1 or 2 or just reversed. So they've done some data on you're more likely to answer it if it looks recognizable, right? Ooh, that looks familiar to me. Maybe I should answer it. So.
Well, yeah, that's why I was saying maybe there's some kind of technical voodoo going on where they're spoofing your number. They have to call you first to grab your number somehow, and then they use that to spoof when they call someone else.
Oh.
And that's how they do it.
That's interesting. So. I suspect it's just they're trying to sell live numbers to some other agency, so they're data mining. And so if you answer, then you're recognized as being a real phone number, and they just say, okay.
Yeah, there's probably some utility in making a database.
Yeah.
And storing that stuff. So.
And that's also the confusing part. Who the susceptible audience for that, or target audience, would be? I assume old people or misinformed people. I don't know, but it just makes me sad for the people falling for these. Or there's a popular one about how there's a warrant out for your arrest, or that
Yeah.
the FBI. I mean, there's some intense ones out there that
Yeah,
I guess are.
I always get the ones that are car warranties. They try to get you a car warranty or selling some kind of cruise trip or something. Those are the only ones I've ever heard, and only because they leave a voicemail, even though they're robots.
Oh, and also the FBI. Like I've gotten some intense ones about the FBI. It has a warrant out for your arrest. Yeah, that sort of stuff. Or at least I know people who have. I don't answer them anymore, so I just don't know. You know, my girlfriend has the approach of answering and like telling do not call. I suspect that might make it worse. I just don't. I mean, none of it works, and so it's more about like what gives you the most peace of mind. If it makes you feel good to sort of scold them, then go right ahead. But like for me, it's just I don't know. I just get annoyed and click ignore. So.
Well, I mean, most of the time for me, they're just robots. I mean, do you ever get actual people spam calling you? I mean, it's just robots for me.
I think that there's, I think it's a mixed bag. I do think the real people will
really
be on the other end, but I don't know enough. I haven't answered in long enough to have any data for you.
Yeah. So. When they're in person, when it's a real person, it's usually like a phishing attack, phishing PH, and they're trying to get your information. So like my mom gets these calls from Microsoft a lot of times, and they tell her to log into her computer and share her access and that kind of thing.
I've even heard eerie things. They try to get you to say yes, the word yes, like is this Daniel? Really? Yes, and now they have a recording of your voice saying yes, and they can probably do things with that. It's like, okay, what? I don't know if that seems far-fetched and silly to me, but that just is the sort of, I feel like urban legends come out of these things, or like everything I'm saying is like we don't know what the do not call list is really. Like yes, it exists in some form, and there might be an example of a recording of someone saying yes out of context, but I don't know if it all belongs right into these calls. So
right, yeah, I don't know.
Want to know my other thought?
Yeah. What is it?
It's just anti-wrinkle cream, and like when you should start using it, if it's a big scam, or is it different than regular cream? Like obviously you would want to start using anti-wrinkle, anti-aging, whatever words you want to call it. You'd want to use it before you started getting a lot of wrinkles. Like I think now, like the time is now, right? And I do think I think it'd be silly to say it's completely ineffective, but over 30 years, someone who has and someone who hasn't, who lived in a similar place, similar age, and presumably would age similarly, maybe they're brothers or something, would be a good case study. But like moisture on the skin, some sort of lotion is going to be decent for over a long time about cracking and stuff. So but what about anti-wrinkle like special formulas? Is that BS? Is there something to do with like is it collagen? No, that's probably not it. Whatever.
No, it is collagen. Like, that's right.
So is it what I just like your scientific take on this, and whether it's largely exaggerated, which almost certainly, right? But like, is there some minimal effect over a long time?
So I mean, actually, you're pretty close with what you're saying. The two things that at least come to my mind when I think about anti-aging. Well, first off, if you hear anti-aging as marketing, it's just BS. Right. Like you can't reverse aging, you can't stop aging, so you're gonna be aging. But
right, just anti-wrinkle.
Yeah, but I mean, once you have the wrinkles, and it's not like you're gonna get any cream to get rid of them.
Wrinkle prevention could be a thing. So possibly.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, there are two things that come to mind, as far as what these creams do and why they're actually useful. And that's the first is what you mentioned, moisturizing. So you put this moisturizer on your skin, it keeps it from getting dry and cracked, and that cracking can cause damage to your skin and maybe scarring. Forms wrinkles down the line. You look aged and leathery, that leathery skin. And then the second thing is actually sun protection, sunscreen. So a lot of a lot of this stuff has SPF, low level SPF in it to protect your skin from the UV rays, and UV rays do actually contribute a lot to aging. In fact, that's actually one thing, a difference. One reason why women's skin looks, even older women's skin can look soft and smooth. Aside from innate physiological differences between men and women, one of the differences is that that women wear makeup, and
yeah.
makeup usually has some sort of UV protection, some SPF built into it, and men don't wear makeup, so men have more sun exposure and more aging.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's why wearing sunscreen on your face is actually helpful.
And I have been using this anti-aging that has a 25 SPF in it, and it doesn't smell like sunscreen, and it doesn't apply like sunscreen, so it just feels like a little lotion. And it has a pleasant, very light scent, and just been putting it on.
Yeah, your guy makeup.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm just turning into. I'm gonna Benjamin Button it and be really young the next time you see me.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that's how it works.
I think you drink it too, right? And I don't really want to shrink is the problem. I like my height or whatever, but anti-aging has its drawbacks, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is you anti-age enough and you end up at the place of your birth. And,
yeah.
Well,
those are my two thoughts. Phone calls and anti-aging cream were on my mind.
Well, there you go. Those are two good ones. Actually, you stole my thunder. Maybe I could do anti-aging cream for the next Daniel Does Science, and yeah, that would have worked out for us.
It would have been funny to ask me. I mean, I really would have said what I said about moisture, and then maybe fumbled over collagen, which is a mystery. And what do you get injected into your lips to make big lips and stuff? Is that also collagen injections?
Yeah, it's collagen is a thing. You're thinking.
Or is that in forehead stuff? What am I? I'm messing up a word.
Yeah, you're thinking Botox. Botox.
Yeah, pretty much. I think so.
That's the one. Botox is the one you get in your head to stretch your skin. But collagen is like it's like this stretchy protein connective tissue thing that makes your skin all stretchy and moldable. And
why would applying that in there's stuff in creams, and it might be collagen, it might be something else, but it's in a lot of these anti-aging creams that's popular right now. And is that just sort of gimmicky, whatever?
Yeah. It's not like it's mostly just science marketing. People don't know what collagen is, but they know that it sounds good. It sounds sciencey. Collagen is a thing that keeps your skin stretchy. So it is related, but it's not like rubbing collagen on yourself is gonna, it's not gonna do anything for you. It's not gonna anti-age your skin. It's not gonna get rid of your wrinkles. It would be like one thing. It would be like vitamin C, for example. You get so much vitamin C in your diet normally, and your body can only absorb so much. You just pee out the rest of it. So these foods that advertise now with vitamin C, extra vitamin C, that's just marketing stuff, because you eat a bunch of vitamin C and you just pee out the excess. So it's not
so that's why these multivitamins and stuff, or not just maybe a multivitamin could be worth it, but if you took a ton of vitamin C because you're feeling unhealthy, or you're feeling not just unhealthy, but you got the sniffles or something that you're just creating expensive pee. Basically, you're peeing it all out.
Right. At this point, this is where I talk about where I'm on a Walkabout podcast, but since I'm re-recording this, I'm actually not on a Walkabout.
Yeah.
And I make some joke about Walkabout podcast, but now I'll just say Daniel is dumb. And there's nothing he can do about it at this point, because we're not talking live to each other. But at this point, I stopped talking about a Walkabout podcast.
If this is successful for you, I'm on board, because I just, we've talked about what is third space before, and being able to move for me, it's almost like fidget toys. It's the same idea of it occupies enough of my energy, I suppose, to allow me to concentrate maximally during a conversation. Because here, weirdly, I'm sitting, I'm facing a wall, I have very little distractions, but I look for something to occupy my energy, so I fidget and I start picking at my fingernails, things like that. It's just I want to move. That's how I'm wired, I guess. So I want to do a walkabout as well.
Yeah, it's really good, and it's nice. Sometimes there's some noises, dogs and people and that kind of thing.
Would someone walking past you recognize, is your microphone, do you have wires and stuff like that? Or is it, what it look like? What's this guy doing? He's on the phone and he's got wires and stuff? Is that what it looks like?
I've got my backpack with my big microphone hanging down over my head.
The big fluffy thing, the big boom mic.
Yeah. And I've got this TV tray rigged up in front of me with my laptop on it, so that I have my notes and everything available. No, actually, no. I've got it's a little portable mic. I just put it in my pocket, and then it's like a lapel, a lapel mic that runs up, and I'm wearing like a black hoodie, so it blends in, and so it's pretty discreet. I don't think anyone would notice or be looking at me weird. So, you could wear that, and it wouldn't be a problem. It's not distracting, and it keeps your brain active, while you're talking. So.
Well, cool. I like it. I like the idea.
If anyone looks at me weird, I can just say I'm doing Third Space Podcast.
Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah.
That should be our approach. Like, we're not going to ever market, and yet we just go up and like, you've heard of it, right? Third Space Podcast. Yeah.
You just assume.
I mean, it kind of has this familiarity, but maybe it's just because it is familiar to me. But if you said that to someone, Third Space Podcast, you've heard that, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think I have. Third Space, that sounds familiar. I've heard the words third and space and podcast before. I don't know if in that order, but yeah.
I was going to ask, did you do anything special for Halloween yesterday, or?
I did, but it wasn't particularly eventful. A teacher buddy and his wife invited us over, and we went over and we watched a movie. We watched Get Out. But the most notable thing was when I went to leave, my car had been egged.
What?
And so,
Dang.
my 4Runner had been egged. Just one singular, maybe two eggs running down the back.
No.
Well, yeah, and I think if you looked at the way my car, it was one of these, if you can imagine a short driveway, and I parked behind his car, so it was close to the road, and just, because we actually looked, and a mailbox had also been hit. And I was looking at other cars, because I was curious. I had my school's bumper sticker on, and like his mailbox says his last name, and I was like, was this
Came
targeted?
after you.
The weird question is, to me, that makes a huge difference is, if kids are just throwing eggs, like, it's just annoying. But if it was like at me, which I know because I was at his house, that would be very improbable. But if it was targeted at me, they'll kind of be like, "Oh, this sucks. This kind of hurts my feelings." So, like, the way I felt about it entirely depends on, like, part of me was like, "Oh, this almost feels like a rite of passage to get egged on Halloween," and there's a weird thrill of like, "Well, I hope they had fun."
No.
That sounds so stupid.
Yeah.
But like, I hope.
No, that's not what I think.
No,
so.
and I don't actually hope. Like, look, it felt innocent. If I came out and it was the whole yard was TP'd and like it was just real like eggs everywhere, I'd be ticked, right? But it felt like nerdy kids trying to. I like to project this is the most
right.
Best presumption of goodwill I can exercise is like they were dorky and they'd taken a couple of eggs and they were like wanting to be bad boys and girls or whatever, and like that's just what they did, and they did one car and they ran away and they were terrified and like have talked about it all the time, I don't know. And in that case, I'm like, I like that story better than I like just some jackasses, pelting my car.
That's very generous of you. I think what you're trying to say is one bad egg doesn't spoil the bunch or something.
Yeah, you're right. As they say. But I'll tell you what
neighborhood hooligans.
He hosed it down for me and we left. It was, late at night. It was like midnight or whatever. And then today I had to really scrub because that stuff, I guess the something in the eggs, that people use eggs because it can ruin paint and stuff.
The collagen. It was the collagen.
It's the collagen in the eggs. the acidic collagen. No, but I scrubbed it off, and then I've been meaning to get my car washed or my 4Runner, so I did, and I'm happy with it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Whatever. I mean, it's not a big deal other than, hey, I got egged, and that felt weird. I went through a range of emotions. Like, is this personal, or is this just...
They were coming for you.
Because, no, that was my number one question. If I got egged because someone, like, didn't like me, that would hurt more than just being egged by random passersby. Yeah. Passers.
I mean, it would... I understand what you mean. Like, being targeted directly, I guess that would be more upsetting than just a random act of egging. Just these random kids throwing stuff around, being chosen to have an egg thrown at you.
I guess so. There's something a little horrifying about random act too. So.
Well, I guess the bad thing about the random egging is that you have no one to get revenge against. And if someone's targeting you, then you can track them down and go after them. And you can take your revenge out. You can throw some eggs back at them, and then now you're on top.
You're right. I was just thinking the other day, I really could use a good feud in my life. I've had a lot of peace for a while. My life's stable. I'd like to up in that, have a nice vengeful feud that really consumes me. And so this opportunity has now presented itself, but it feels wasted because, I have this directionless energy. So I think I'm just going to pay it forward, Like, I think I'm just going to go buy some eggs tonight and see what we do.
Yeah, go take it out. Take it out on them. And that's... I think that's the right thing to do. That's the only choice at your disposal here. Get some justice, right? Egg justice.
Are you suggesting that I should, since something bad happened to me, or maybe not even, I should just take it out on others in a destructive manner? That should be my, and I can make it like a political statement, right? Like this is a healthy exercising of my rights. Like I was wronged.
Yeah, now. It's your right to get eggs and go throw eggs at some other people, or worse than eggs. I don't know. That's what they say, to make hay while the sun shines.
Make hay while the sun shines. Don't let a good tragedy go to waste.
Yeah, I've heard that.
The tragedy of my egg, one
man's egg.
I should really
is another tragedy.
Yeah. Okay.
Something.
Anyway. What'd you do for Halloween?
I didn't. I had a boring Halloween. I didn't really do anything. I didn't bring up that topic to talk about my Halloween. I was just wanting to see what you did. Yeah, I'm real boring when it comes to Halloween. I don't like dressing up. I don't like trick or treating. I don't eat a lot of candy. It's not the holiday for me. It's a lot of people's favorites, but not really.
Is there no thrill in horror for you? And now that I think about it, we've been friends a long time, and I'm a fan of horror to some degree, and you clearly aren't because you've never matched that or discussed that with me. But why? Because
it's because I just don't get scared from horror movies, and that's the thing.
Why?
Well, it's just I think maybe the problem is I can't suspend my disbelief enough to get to be afraid when I'm watching a horror movie, and that's the whole point of a horror movie, is to feel that emotion, to feel that fear. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I'm always aware that it's a movie. And so it's not like, that's what a horror movie has going for it. It's not like horror movies have, good actors and high budgets. That just doesn't, that's not what it's there for. It's not like they have, really strong stories. So like when you take away that fear, there's just not much left to it. So it just ends up kind of a boring sort of thing.
If you can't be scared, then...
Yeah, then it's not... There's no point.
I get it. You're so brave and courageous, and you're just so...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's just me being better. I'm too courageous. I'm just too courageous to enjoy horror movies.
You're just too brave.
But I will say that, I don't like regular horror movies, but what I do get a kick out of, and you're well aware of this, is... some of my favorite horror movies are B-movie horror movies. And those are great because the fear part isn't really, it's irrelevant in a way. It's the failure to inspire the fear.
Well, that's why it is relevant. Like they think they're achieving something horrific and terrifying, and how far that is from the truth is such a joy to laugh at.
Yeah, that's the best part, is when they think they're gonna scare you. And then it falls totally flat, and that's the best part. That makes it enjoyable to laugh at. But there's just no way that they're gonna instill any legitimate sense of fear. And I don't know. That's why horror movies. I've just never done it for me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's fair. One of the reasons that they are so prolific or ever present or whatever is they're cheap to make, right? Like you don't need a vast like fantasy setting or a big budget. You just take a dark closed space,
fake
some eerie
blood.
Images, and I mean, like a good old slasher film.
Don't even need good actors,
And so that's the problem, though, is that it's plagued with. You are right in your criticism. If I were to just select any genre and I had to take a random movie, horror would be last on my list because the probability of getting a bad one is higher than probably any other genre. And bad enough, like you said, like a lot of horror deals with sound to create that mood, and so we've gotten very good like good sound for cheap now. And so any horror movie is going to have pretty eerie, just gross sounds or noises or creepy things, even if it's a failure on all other fronts. So it's going to be just good enough to be meh and not be like the enjoyment of the B movie that we enjoy. So like, yeah, it's the worst case scenarios. You just have these half-assed movies that, you know, especially if you don't do it well, it can feel so gratuitous with the murdering and the gore and stuff. And you're right, there's a lot that can go wrong, and they're so easy to make that there's plenty out there of just mediocre horror. So I'm with you. And like you said, it's not very scary for you, so it's not cathartic. It's not a thrill. That it's not a safe thrill, because that's what I think the appeal of horror is that you get to go have an intense experience that's safely within the confines of like your home or you know, the movie theater or whatever.
Well, I don't have anything innately against horror movies. You know, it's not like I have some huge disdain for horror movies, like, for example, like I do with like rap or something. So it's not like I hate horror movies or people who like horror movies. It's just, you know, it's not for me. But I mean, it's possible that, you know, you could have some kind of horror movie with a better story or a psychological thriller or some niche kind of horror that might be more appealing to me. I mean, I don't know. It's possible, but
I root for horror movies because when you have all these tentpole, big, gigantic blockbuster films that you know can't be risky, and then you have on the opposite end cheap horror that like needs to stand out from the bunch because you're either just going to appeal to and make your safe, stupid horror movie that I'm never going to watch, or you take a risk and you do something unusual and it doesn't cost a lot of money. So there's just room for creativity and risk-taking in horror movies. So that's why I sort of like, that's probably where I'm drawn to it. Just like, take a risk. You don't have to tell this sort of love story or cheesy stuff that gets folded into so many movies now. You just got to be scary. And there's a lot of different ways to be scary. So I like to see the different interpretations of horror out there. So I just like it.
And I mean, it's not like I wouldn't be willing to give horror a shot, you know, forever. Maybe if there was something more appealing or niche or risky, like you say, I might pull out the old VHS tape and put it in. And,
the old video tapes,
Vigitapes, and I might give that a shot. But you know, most of the time, it's just probably not going to happen.
Fair enough.
So, yeah,
I'm not going to win you over.
No. Well, we had a really long opening there, but I actually have an opening segment that I wanted to start with.
Let me hear it.
That's another Superpowers and Drawbacks, finally.
Oh, I really want to do one. I'm in the mood for a superpower and drawback.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since our last one.
Okay.
And so it's time to start it up again. It's one of my favorite segments.
Superpowers and drawbacks. They gotta choose one and the other.
Wow, that was a great jingle. That was actually really good. So
I just think we should also have jingles for our segments. It would be nice.
I can't wait to hear your jingle for Mind Your Morals or Daniel Does Science or a nice poppy one for
I'm gonna have to learn to play the piano and then
do it, learn it.
Do that.
Do it.
Yes, that's gonna be my motivating factor.
All right, so this time we're gonna go with Superpowers and Drawbacks level 3.
Okay.
Power level 3. I don't think we've done that one before.
So. I think we did a 4 one time was the highest, and we've done a lot of 1s and 2s. So yeah, I don't think we've hit a 3.
I think we did a 6 actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Right. One time.
I'm ready.
But usually they're lower than that. So. All right. So the first superpower that you get to choose from is called Super Skipper.
Super Skipper.
Yeah, Super Skipper.
Yeah. Okay.
So for this one, you are 1.5 times faster than the fastest Olympic sprinter, but only when skipping. Yeah. So that's
and
how.
You mean my skipping is faster than their running? To be clear.
Yes. Yeah. The fastest speed that the fastest Olympic sprinter can run, you can skip 1.5 times faster than that speed, but you have to be
pretty
skipping.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that's really fast. Yes.
Right. All right. So you get to choose between Super Skipper and this second superpower, and that one's called Printer Copier. So for Printer Copier, whenever you shake someone's hand, your fingerprints morph to mimic theirs, and this lasts until you shake hands with someone else.
I guess that'd be useful if I were criminally inclined.
Yes. And also, you can get your original fingerprints back by shaking hands with your feet.
Okay.
So I don't know I don't know if you call it shaking feet, shaking hands, shaking feet, shake hand feet. I don't know. So.
Shake feet shake. Feet
Ugh.
shake. That sounds gross. A feet shake as like a milkshake alternative. Anyway, yeah, no, got it. Printer copier.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to be the bad guy.
Your felt genuine there, like it like kind of caught you, and you went ugh. Like, that's
feet
really
shake,
gross.
feet shake. Yeah, sounds like a bad flavor. So in order to get one of those two superpowers, you have to choose also one of these drawbacks. The first drawback is called weekly haunting. So for this one, once a week at a random time, a spectral human form, only visible to you, appears nearby and watches you. So it can't speak, it can't hurt you, or affect anything in the physical realm. But its appearance changes. Sometimes it's a man, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's a child, and these hauntings, they last anywhere between 30 minutes and 6 hours.
And how their proximity to me is what?
It could be anything. It's just random. So
it could be across the street. Could be next on my couch. You know.
Yeah, you could be driving in your car and they could appear in the passenger seat. You could be at school and you could look over into the bleachers far away and you can see this ghost or whatever staring at you there.
And it tends and you said for an hour.
Yeah, well, before. Anywhere between 30 minutes and 6 hours.
30 minutes to 6 hours, you don't know, and it will, once it's in that haunting process, it follows you probably equidistance to when it appears. So if it's across the street, it'll remain at street distance.
Yeah. Generally the same.
Following you. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
And it will not do anything other than be possibly quite intense on the creepy factor, and I'm the only one that sees it.
Yeah, it can't actually hurt you. No one else can see it, but it could be really creepy. Like it could be like a dead family member with lesions, or a child with its throat slit, or
Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be really creepy. So. All right. So the other drawback is called keep your friends close and your enemies far away. So for this one,
as they say.
Yeah, as they say. Yeah, it's a common phrase. So for this one, people who you dislike will smell absolutely awful to you. So the strength and disgustingness of this odor is proportional to how much you dislike them.
Okay.
But the minimum is rotting garbage, smellable.
Oh gosh.
Smellable within 5 feet. No one can smell it but you, though. So. It's not like everyone around that person smells it. They don't smell it. You're the only one that can smell the terrible smell of the person you dislike.
Do the friends smell good? Or is okay.
No. People who you don't dislike just smell like their normal selves. So if they smell good normally, they smell good. If they smell bad, they smell bad. But your dislike doesn't affect what they smell like.
So it really should just be called "keep your enemies far away," but it doesn't sound as good.
Well, yeah, that's not the phrase.
Close and.
Yeah, I try to come up with decent little names for these things.
I like this. So if I don't know someone, they have no, they're neutral. They have their natural smell.
Right.
And
yeah, they just smell like normal. It's only if you psychologically dislike someone,
or have been told that they're jerks and they like screwed over your best friend, so you see them and they smell pretty bad, right?
Well, it's all about what's in your head. It's all your psychological dislike. So, if you truly feel that dislike for them, then they'll smell bad. But if you don't, then they won't.
That's interesting. You could learn about all sorts of prejudices that you have that you don't fully understand. Okay, so
right, like if you're biased, then that would.
What about you're on a date? You're on a blind date with someone, and they like.
I like that. I like that one.
Yeah,
that's
what I'm
interesting.
saying. So they start like having a bad conversation, or they're making points you don't agree with, or they tell a bad joke. I don't know, whatever. Or the second they walk up,
it could go wrong. It could go really wrong.
So this is weird. So let's say people like let's say some women are walking by you that you don't find particularly attractive, but like you don't care. They're not going to smell like garbage. But if that same woman now is your blind date and you're supposed to sort of be determining your attraction, and you don't find them attractive, they're going to smell. Is that a correct use of this or drawback?
Well, it's all about what's in your head.
Like someone walking past you just doesn't. You don't feel anything toward them.
Right. Yes.
So that's the point.
Yeah. Exactly. So.
But then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I'm your date," and you're like disappointed. Then they'd start smelling.
Well, no, so it all depends on your psychological state in your head. So if you actually feel dislike for someone, that's when they smell. If you're just disappointed with the situation and not them, then they may not smell. So in this blind date situation, it kind of shows something about what's inside your head. If you're disappointed that maybe your date's not attractive or whatever, they won't necessarily smell it if you dislike the situation. But maybe if you're not as good as you could be, if you're giving in to your negative impulses, some of that disappointment may filter into the date, and you may actually dislike them, which would mean they would start to smell.
I like that distinction, because when you're on a date with someone and you don't like them, you don't dislike them. You just don't like them, and unless they start being a jerk or whatever it is that offends your sensibilities, and then they start smelling.
Right. So that's actually the really funny thing to me, is that you could be on a blind date and they not smell, and then they would start to smell, and that actually tells you something about the way you see them.
And so they would start. So this is interesting that they would start to smell, and I like this idea of them in the moment starting to smell.
Yeah. It's really funny, and it would be terrible too, like at a dinner or something, and all of a sudden
it sounds like a movie that would be like, what was
like a bad sitcom episode.
There was some movie about like a guy saw the inner beauty.
Yeah.
What was it?
Kevin James. It had Kevin James.
Was it? He was in it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, that comedian that was really, really popular for
like
a little
Paul
while.
Blart.
Like he got that Kurt.
He was in Paul Blart, Mall Cop, King of Queens.
Not Kevin James, unless Kevin James was in the movie, but this was
wasn't it? Was it Jack Black? It was Jack Black, wasn't it?
I'm gonna butcher that. It's not worth.
It was Jack Black. Jack Black in Shallow Hal. That was the name, wasn't it?
No, this is a Shallow Hal with That Is It. And
yeah. That was it with Jack Black.
Quickly. They might be in.
I'm pretty sure that was.
They might be in the movie, but it's the star is.
It's got to be Jack. I'm pretty sure it's Jack Black in that one.
Oh, you are right. It's Jack Black. Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is Hal. Well, who is this?
I thought that was it.
You are right.
Yeah, I didn't ever actually see the movie, but.
Oh my gosh, I'm annoyed that I have a false memory of I would have bet a lot of money. Anyway, so
Mandela
great
effect.
movie, I'm sure. I've never seen it either. But yeah, the smell thing, it sounds similar to that. And it could have a lot of funny or just goofy. This would be a PG-13 crappy comedy.
Smell and Dan. It'd be called Smell and Dan.
Smell and Dan. Smell and Dan. Weird. Okay, so let me go back over this. So we got Super Skipper, so I can skip it at almost superhuman speed, 1.5 times the fastest person in the world, or Olympian or whatever.
Right.
Printer copier, shaking hands gives me their
fingerprints.
Fingerprints. Weekly haunting is this eerie, celestial figure or just a ghost basically haunts me for between 30 minutes and 6 hours once a week. And does not harm me or curse me or give me bad luck or anything like that.
Right.
And then people I don't like start smelling bad, and it's proportional to how strong my distaste for them is. And so something you'd have to weigh into that is
yeah, that's right.
How often do you have to be around people you have a distaste for, because that would affect you. It also rewards someone who's friendly, kind of likes everybody. They are going to have a more pleasant experience with this drawback.
Right.
Or they have less encounters about.
You could cultivate.
It could make you a better person.
Yeah, cultivate a better bubble around yourself, I guess you could say. You could work on your mental state to not dislike people.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't experience the drawback as much.
That's an interesting outlook of how it could have a positive benefit that I learn to dislike people less in order to not have to deal with their smelliness. And because the weekly haunting thing is interesting because I could see for some people this would be a 10 on the scale of 1 to 10, right? Like just no, I'm not ever doing that. But part of me is like you could put that at a 1. It's a visually unsettling thing that you can avoid and will not do anything to you. And it's not going to jump scare you and cause you to wreck. There's no risk. Like part of me is like this.
It could jump scare you.
I mean, it could cause a wreck. Yes. Oh, I guess when it okay.
Like in the
You're right. When it
seat.
appears, there's some ambiguity of the appearance. Yeah. And I wish you could give me some clue, and I don't know if it's fair to ask, like how frequently will they be like next to me? Because if it were
random.
every time next to me, yeah, it's but random is like how far away is far away, you know? That's so it's
Well, it's uniformly random. So brush up on your statistics.
Yeah, uniformly random does so, but like, and you don't know when it'll be. And can we say that it's in waking hours typically though? So
No,
or
not necessarily. It could be it could be the middle of the night or something. You could wake up and they would be watching you. That'd be kind of creepy. So yeah, you can't.
Right.
You can't
That's
tell.
actually maybe we're in a weird way. Like, I don't like that. But like, the weird thing is the knowledge that there's the creepy thing about a figure staring at you is the uncertainty of like, what are they plotting? What are they thinking?
The
intention and your lack of knowledge of the intention. But if you've given me intention, you've said they're just there to be sort of bother you, to be a drawback. So you've made it not a drawback almost for me.
I actually thought about this point before as a drawback writer. I was kind of in a bind because if I tell you that you don't know if they're gonna try to kill you or hurt you or whatever, that changes the whole ball game like totally
A lot.
yeah. And so I have to tell you they have no ill intent.
I mean, then it's at a 10 and I would never take it ever. So
right.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Some people would find it, a 10 really scary. Other people would find it a 1 not, they could easily deal with it. So I'll leave it to you to decide.
Part of it is I have to agree to it before I know how unsettling it is. I don't get to test run this, and if I choose it, it could be very, very upsetting in a way I didn't expect. Because you can't know yourself 100%. Like, I'm predicting it wouldn't be that bad. I'd just be like, ooh, that's weird. Anyway.
Well, it could be disturbing. It could be disturbing either way. Like I say, it could be something really scary, like a dead family member with their face all chopped up, or a dead kid or something. It could be really, really scary.
Yeah.
But it could be also an innocuous person,
Casper-looking ghost.
Yeah, just a normal
ghost.
person, except they're kind of a semi-transparent, creepy ghost. I guess it would still be kind of unsettling.
I think it'd be unsettling no matter what. It could be like a friendly-looking person, but they're just watching you. I mean, that's
staring at you.
They're just looking at you
with their head kind of downturned.
But then again,
So what do you choose?
Yeah, sorry. I don't see much printer copier. I'm just tossing that out. I want to examine quickly. Like, I don't care. I've never used my hand. Fingerprints have played such a little role, only in like getting a job as a background check.
They could play a role.
It's played such a. It would. Yeah, you're right. Like, if I take that on, I'd say, all right, well, now how can I use this? And that it just seems to be criminally oriented, like everything.
Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be criminal. You could be a spy, like CIA or FBI.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you could be a good guy.
You're right, and that would be very powerful for a spy. So then, am I willing to up in my life? I have no passion or desire or I don't think I'd be good at being a spy. So I think I'd fail on that, even with this superpower. So
yeah, I think you'd be a bad spy.
Yeah,
so.
I do. I just think it's not in my. It's counter to so many of my like who I am. Like, I like to talk about things, and I like to anyway. So I just don't see it being. It just doesn't appeal to me. Super skipper. I mean, I don't need to be fast at all.
Right.
But the ability to do it is kind of cool, and I'd probably start entering some races and go ahead and, I mean, that alone could be really lucrative, and yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be very lucrative and like so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Olympics, they don't have a style guideline, so you could just be skipping along the race.
People would freak out. That's actually. So I'm definitely taking this. I'm taking the super skipper and making it my career in addition to teaching, because I don't think I need to go train. I can just do it, right? So people will be like, why isn't he training? Why is he spending all this time teaching? And then I just go out there and kick butt, and it just sort of like, what? This English teaching, super skipping, person. Like, really weird.
Well, at least until I find some other podcast host or guest or something, and they take a better power.
Yeah,
and then you have to compete. You actually have to compete. So
yeah, because you did put a limitation. Yeah, you said you're right. I'm 1.5 times the fastest person. So that doesn't mean if someone else was a superpower, Olympian, they would be faster, because mine's only the Olympic runner speed and 1.5 times. So this is what I'm doing. I'm taking super skipper and this is not where my mind was originally, but I'm going there. Keep your friends close and your enemies far away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that one.
Yes.
Why?
Because I can't accurately assess how upsetting the weekly haunting is going to be. I think I can, but I could see this being one of those gray areas where it's way worse than I thought. And it might screw with me, and like I could see something really upsetting if a loved one like dies, and then I'm seeing them, even though I know it's just some sort of that's my weekly haunting, and I can intellectually distance myself. Yeah, but it would just that reminder would be upsetting, and I just don't know. I just so the unpredictability of that. Whereas I can handle bad smells. Well, I don't know how well I can.
Well, I mean, it starts at rotting garbage. So.
Yes, and gets more and more repulsive. I don't feel intense. I don't think it'd go for me right now in my life. I don't have strong enemies in my life, and I think this would actually be something I can use for the good, and I can start learning about myself. So I really could learn about some biases, and I could learn about like how to just willfully not have strong distaste for people, and so I actually think I could maneuver this into possibly pushing me to be a better person.
Yeah. All right.
So there.
All right.
Super skipper and enemies far away.
Good choices. Those are decent choices, well reasoned. So.
What are you doing?
I think I'm taking super skipper as well, probably for the exact same reasons you listed. I mean, I don't ever have to go fast. I don't really need to run fast, but I don't know. Sometimes you got to run, man. And if I could super skip, then I could super skip while looking quite joyful. And
can you picture a mugger? A mugger is like, hand over your money, and you skip away.
Yeah.
So
right?
Funny.
It'd be awesome. You make some headlines.
You look happy while you're doing it.
Yeah. That's a great visual. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'd have to make it my career, right? Like, I don't think that's an opportunity you can pass up.
Yeah, you just walk out there and do it once every 4 years, and like get all these deals and stuff. Like, you don't why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, I mean, just the pure wackiness of it is going to get you headlines.
Oh my god,
it's so much attention.
They'll make documentaries on you. So
right, you'll be real popular, the super skipping racer or whatever. So now for printer copier, I think for the same reasons you outlined, I don't think I take that. I mean, if I was a person of questionable morals, maybe that would be a little bit more valuable. But yeah, I don't want to be a spy. And so
it's just not that thrilling, because I don't want to do that. I think that's going to lead to a life of misery, right? Like, I believe you reap what you sow. If you start stealing, like, I don't know. I think even if I can't bury that feeling. Even if I had success with the theft, I think it would plague me.
Yeah.
So I just, not gonna go well for me.
Right.
I like the name of it, but yeah,
it's a good name. And I think I'm gonna take weekly haunting for my drawback. I don't think it would bother me that much, and for all the same reasons as horror movies. Yeah. Like, horror movies don't bother me. I don't get really scared by those images in a movie. If this is a similar apparition that's not going to hurt me or harm me, like, regardless of how creepy it is, I think I can handle it.
They're quiet, by the way. They don't just talk to you, but like, even if they had like a gargling breath because they're slit throat, they're not just sitting there going, yeah, okay.
No, they're quiet. Yeah, they're quiet.
Well,
They can't say anything.
I want to say weekly haunting, but like I said, I'm a little disappointed. But at least I know myself well enough to go, all right, there's a little too much gray area for me to be comfortable just saying, oh yeah, it wouldn't bother me. Like it could surprise me, even though I think I'm in your camp that I'd be just fine. It could
too
upset
much
me.
Too much of a scary.
But not worth the risk, especially when I get enemies far away. Like I can deal with that. So
on the flip side, I think that the bad smells would be horrible. It would be a horrible plague for me because I'm really sensitive to bad smells. I also think I dislike more people than you do, so that would be really bad. And also I don't want to take it because, I kind of think it's valuable to expose yourself to people you dislike. Sometimes it helps you build resilience. And, it lets you overcome that challenge. And if they smelled so horrible, I would just avoid people. I would avoid people I disliked. And then I would never build up that resistance.
Yeah.
And, so basically I can tolerate the contorted visage of a dead ancestor, but I ain't putting up with no stinky people. That's not for me.
Well put. That's really funny. But I don't want to deal with stinky people.
Right. Yeah.
So you have something else you want to pitch to me?
Yes, I have another topic to discuss, a very topical topic.
I like topical topics.
So considering, as at the time of this recording, Election Day is only a couple of days away, I want to talk to you about voting. And before you groan, I feel
like groaning right now.
Yeah, I know you want to groan because there's all of this get out the vote crap. Everyone seems to be trying to motivate people into going out and voting. And obviously there's nothing wrong with voting, but I just have an instinctive resistance to being told what to do. I'd rather do things in my own volition. Anyway, I don't want to talk about voting with respect to this election. This conversation isn't meant to be about that. I want to talk about how the voting system could be improved. In past conversations, we've talked about how we could improve the prison system, for example, or the education system, or the transportation system, and we imagine a brand new world in which we get to snap our fingers and design everything. And that's kind of what I want to do with voting. I think it could be interesting.
Sure.
I voted the other day, and ever since it's kind of been on my mind a little bit. I've been thinking about the process and how it could be improved. And, of course, on the news, it's all over people talking about voter fraud and deadlines. And it seems like at least some people think there's some way that voting could be improved.
Well, really quick, just some clarifying questions. Yeah. Do you mean... We're not talking about like electoral college stuff. We're talking about how to get people to vote for one of two, or vote for a candidate. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to
not the election process and how the winner is decided, but you're talking about like the means to go vote.
Right. Well, it's all kind of tied together. You can't. Once you start to get into one part of it, the logistics and engineering, you kind of end up talking about the rules anyway, but I'm a little bit more interested in the logistics and engineering, so we can start there and kind of see where it goes.
Right.
I don't want to rule any of it out.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I just I wanted to limit my focus not on like criticizing or endorsing the Electoral College and like, doing a history lesson and stuff. It's more just like, all right, well, can we get a baseline on how it generally works right now to in order to vote? You've got to be a citizen, and like there's different polling places.
Right.
And...
Actually, what I'd like to do is while you kind of mull over the thought of voting and maybe have some ideas pop into the back of your head, I'd like to kind of talk about the history a little bit. I know that sounds maybe a little boring, but actually, voting has changed quite a lot since the beginning of the United States. So I kind of want to talk about how it was way back in the day in the 1700s, and then how it's changed a little bit. Some things throughout history we only seem to. It's just a bunch of incremental changes. Maybe some of those changes have been good. maybe some of those changes have been bad.
Well,
and you can make them better.
That's why I'd like to examine some of these. So like, part of my inclination is that, like, okay, if you're a citizen and making it easy to vote, so you have several polling places that you go and vote, or because it just seems a little bit sketchy to be able to do this over, say, the internet, even though it seems like if we could come up with a solution to be able to just log into the secure website,
Right. Well, if I could, I'd like to kind of just go through how things have changed.
I would like to hear that, yeah.
A little bit, because actually the ideas that you're putting out, the questions that you're asking, the suggestions are actually some of the questions that I really want to kind of get into. I think that's interesting. So, do you know, way back in the day, like in the 1700s when things started, do you know how things worked?
I really don't.
Well, it's actually pretty interesting. So, like, way back in the 1700s when it was just the American colonies, the only people allowed to vote, of course, this is something you're aware of, or they were called freeholders, and they had to be, wealthy property-owning men.
Property-owning men. Okay, that was a big component, is the owning of the property.
Right. Yeah, that was an important piece.
I guess that meant you owned a little bit of America, and then. Yeah, are we talking about America specifically, right? Or okay.
Yeah, just the United States. Okay. That's the only thing that I researched, and that's the only thing that I really know about. In fact, I think all other countries are monarchies, so we can't even talk about them. So, but back in the day when things started, like I say, it was freeholders, but there were no ballots. They didn't have paper ballots. They didn't have absentee ballots, and they couldn't do mail-in voting because the post office wasn't really around. So the way it worked is they actually had to. These people who could vote had to physically travel to their voting house. And it was all done publicly. So when they wanted to vote for someone, the people would go down the voter rolls and say, who do you vote for? You stand up, call out who you're voting for, and then the candidate would, stand up, bow, and thank you for your vote.
This is nuts. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? It's wild.
Yeah, public opinion and popularity. And I mean, this sounds like so... Yeah, anyway, it sounds kind of cool, the party component, but it's so ripe for being a popularity contest, right? Whoever can schmooze the most people and feel the tide shifting, whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing about having it all out in public. I guess your opinions are a little bit more susceptible to groupthink. But on the flip side, it's more of an open discussion. And back in the day, people weren't so divided. Everyone was a founder, basically. And so it was kind of a discussion of ideas. Sure. But one other thing that I found really interesting, you talk about a party component. It really was like this big, rambunctious party. There was a lot of alcohol. The candidates would actually supply alcohol to all of the voters. In one famous instance, George Washington, he lost one election. And then he came back the next election with a whole bunch of booze and gave booze to all his voters. And then he actually ended up winning that election. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy the way things used to work. And another thing that was really interesting is they actually explicitly did not like secret ballots. They thought that secret ballots were cowardly. And you shouldn't use them.
Is there something to that? Is there something cowardly about secret ballots?
Maybe. I think that's something maybe we should unpack after we go through the history of it. But if I could, I want to just walk through the rest of it because it won't take too long. So in the 1800s, that's when the secret ballot kind of actually started coming along towards the end of it. But at the beginning, when they started doing paper ballots, you actually had to bring your own ballot. And you had to remember all the candidates, their names, how to spell it. If you didn't spell their name right, then your vote got tossed out. So you had to be literate, which wasn't as common as it is today, although today it's still somewhat uncommon. But eventually the candidates started providing their own ballots.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine how this kind of turned into a race to see who could produce the most ballots and pass them out, because the more ballots you got out, the more people could vote for you. And so it kind of became less about the candidate and more about the method of voting, which we see some of that today.
Right.
And they started to brand their ballots, with for particular parties, and that's actually where the two-party system sort of began. It was, does the Republican ticket Is it this ballot or
Here's the elephant. Here's the donkey.
Yeah, sort of like that. And so it became kind of a battle over the ticket. Who could produce the most tickets, and which ticket do you get and take and fill out?
Is that where the phrase "they get on the ticket, get on the Republican ticket, get on the Democratic ticket"?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly where it came from. It started back then because it looks like a train ticket. One other thing that I read that I don't quite understand, but apparently it was common back then as well when you hand out the ballot to a voter to also just hand them a few coins and
like money.
Yeah, like money.
It's so weird. Here's a little money.
Yeah, isn't it strange? Like a bribe or something? I don't know. But
and this wasn't considered like immoral bribery.
No, they called it like soap money or something. I don't really know the full story behind that one, but there was a lot of shady business that could happen. A lot of things could be kind of corrupted back then. Actually, the 1800s is really that's where all the action happened, because technology was changing. There was a lot of developments, in the country itself, obviously, during that time. But, we went from, some people calling out their votes by voice to paper ballots that you bring to printed paper ballots. There's actually a big controversy over printed ballots because there was the question of whether it was constitutional or not, because if you have a printed ballot, then you don't actually have to know.
Oh, wow.
You don't actually have to know the candidates on the ticket. You can just fill in a circle or whatever. And there was the contention that maybe it's your duty to know the candidates and know who you're voting for instead of just filling in a circle. Wow. So that was something kind of interesting. And then on the note of how voting was carried out, one interesting tidbit that I learned was that the state of Kentucky, because everything was different in all the states, the state of Kentucky, they actually continued voting out loud by voice in person until 1891. So I thought that was kind of wild. But most people in the middle of the 1800s, they started to move towards the secret ballot. I guess the 1700s folks, they were dead and gone by this time, and they didn't cry that it was cowardly. And so they moved to the secret ballot, and it was actually based on Australia's voting system, their secret ballot. So it was, you get your ballot, you go into some secluded booth or spot and pull a curtain behind you or something and fill it out and turn it in. And that's kind of how it was done. And by the end of the 1800s, they were using different technologies. So they were using punch machines and levers, and then the technology and the restrictions just kind of continued to change through the 1900s. So all the way up until 1965, there were literacy tests that could be imposed before you could vote. And of course, in the 1920s, women were allowed to vote. And then also way back in the in Reconstruction in the 1800s, black people were allowed the right to vote. So gradually, more and more of the population were available to actually cast their vote. Technology continued to advance. We saw things like optical scanners coming in the 1900s to read the ballots, and so that changed. Every time you have one of these technological advancements, things kind of shift. And then as we get to the 2000s, a time when we actually were alive to witness it,
right.
You had things like the infamous hanging Chad.
In Florida specifically, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a technologically influenced election. I mean, that's an example of where the method the method of voting actually can affect an election. And so, you have to design your system well, or you could end up with a poor election. And then further in the 2000s, they started experimenting with touchscreens, which were found to be really insecure. Unsecure is probably a better way to say it. They actually found that by changing a memory card, you could actually you could change a ton of the votes. So we actually ended up going back to paper ballots in most places. So that's kind of where we stand.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that was very informative and really interesting, actually.
It just goes to show you that there's an always evolving technological progression, and And sometimes the rules hinge on the technology. And then when technology changes out from under you, the rules may not update alongside in step with the technology. And that was kind of the reason why I thought this would be an interesting topic, because here, at least in this point in time, if we snap our fingers, we don't have to worry about, the rules or technology. We can make what we want.
Right.
And so we have a lot of freedom to decide how we want things to go in this discussion. And so I don't know, I'm interested to see what you come up with or what we can come up with. Maybe we can improve on things or come up with a system that I guess seems more fair or is more functional even.
Right. And is it really so difficult to produce something that isn't right for corruption digitally? Like, because touchscreens with the secure system makes sense, because and then it just shows you at the end, are you sure you meant this? Like, double check, and then you click yes, submit, and there you go. And so long as it's not being hacked,
Yeah.
or at least protected against hacking, because it will attempts will be made, I assume, which is a sad assumption, but I think it's a safe one.
Yes.
But one of the questions that to me was interesting was when you said that they introduced the printing press would print the ballots or whatever. I don't know if you said printing press, but the mass printing, and it led to a debate about, well, you need to know the candidate's name. You need to at least know them. And now we face this situation where you could just check a box or whatever. And I go back and forth on this idea of, I think one way of keeping some people oppressed is you could develop those tests, right? One of their tests for black people about how
literacy,
they had their signature
literacy
and
tests.
Literacy tests. And they were so crap, right? Like they were failing them in order to prevent them from voting. On the weird to say on the flip side, but the idea of you have to be informed about the candidates you're voting for seems almost common sense, or the policy that you're voting for. Like, you need to know what you're voting for. Makes just a lot of sense. And I think most people would say, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So this popped in my head and seems ridiculous, though, at the same time. What if you were required to attend no more than an hour course that was free to everyone? They had them frequently, literally like on the hour, every hour for several months, and it was a pre-approved, here are the candidates, here are the positions, and they both, like, all the parties involved would have to agree and give their stamp of approval of, like, yes, that is what we're saying. And you had to sit through it, and then at the end you could vote. And that's just an idea. So that, and you had to maybe even pass a quick multiple choice. Did you understand this? What is this policy? What does this candidate stand for? To make sure you weren't just like completely zoned out. And then. And it was truly something that people with, say, a 60 IQ. I don't know my IQ well, but that's pretty low IQ, right? They're functionally, like, at what point do you? It's very low. It's very low. I mean, 100's average, right? So, but you are functional and you're allowed to vote, and you can pass this this easy multiple choice that is only meant to say, do you understand these policies and these candidates' positions, and then you can vote. But like. Is that so obtrusive to demand that someone take a course to be able to vote? I'm just throwing that out there as sort of a starting point of how educated do you need them to be?
Well, it's an interesting idea. I mean, at some level, it seems very reasonable that if you're going to be voting, you should know what you're voting for and what the issues are. Some things that pop into my head. When I think about that, like a mandatory course, that means that there has to be a place to take this test, and people to staff it, people to ensure that you're abiding by the rules that you're setting, and that's a lot of expense. To put in place. Another thing that obviously worries me is that who writes this information for the test. Is it one party or the other party? And if you get information from both candidates, is it skewed? Is it just the facts? Is it cut and dry? I don't know. That presents some problems. But I think the fundamental question you're asking about, should you be knowledgeable or not? I think that's an important question.
Yeah.
And I think I'm tempted to say, yeah, maybe there should be some sort of test. In the past, when we instituted literacy tests or whatever, they were prone to corruption, and we could bar people from voting, based on race or something. But if we apply the same standard to everyone and just say, well, everyone has to have knowledge, maybe it's something we could revisit.
It's just, if I'm asking you to weigh in, essentially a vote is weighing in on your opinion on policy. I think we should move in this direction, and the other, that's what the parties represent.
Right.
And so, yes, in order to weigh in, common sense dictates that you must know what you're weighing in on. Just, of course, right? And so, and that's why even though the people who already know the candidates in this hour-long course or whatever we would agree, I'm just trying to figure out something to say to ensure that at the bare minimum you have this amount of awareness, and you don't get to opt out just because you campaigned for one of the teams, or you don't get to opt out just because you donated $500,000 or whatever. Like, you just got to do the course. Like, it's what you do, and you got to pass that test.
Right.
And the test is not in any way like it would very much work hard to be devoid of judgment. They actually would take some submissions from the campaigns. Right. Here's our belief system. Here's our policy, and then perhaps that's how it would be. Like, they get their every party gets 15 minutes to sort of lay out what they're doing, or I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, there you go. Like,
I mean, the one, again, like, my concern with something like that is just that you're going to end up with two commercials. You're going to get two 15-minute commercials. And another thing is it okay for, in one candidate's ad or test or whatever to talk about how their opponent is bad? Are you just going to get smears, or do they have to be stuck? Right. Are they only talking about their own positions, or what? Like, I'm not sure it's even possible to do only here are my stances, when the temptation is always so strong to say, oh, my stance is not to do this. I will not raise your taxes, that kind of thing. It's even though you're saying something true and factual, you're taking a jab at your opponent in a way. Is that okay?
Yeah, here's where it would get complicated. So let's say we said you're not allowed to smear the other candidate. You're only allowed to talk about your position. Like, let's just say that was a rule, and you get your 15 minutes that we're going to approve as long as it follows these guidelines.
Right.
The problem is their pitch is going to say something like, let's say a conservative would say, like, we're going to cut taxes, and we're not going to raise your taxes like some, they could really edge into criticism.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like, we believe instead of oppressing you by taxing you a ton, we're going to lower your taxes. So you've created a smear while you go, what are you talking about? I'm just saying we cut taxes. So
right. Yeah, well, that's the thing about the smearing. You're not sure if it's a smear or a fact. And I guess in a way, a smear can be a fact. And a lot of people, especially nowadays, view facts as smears. So, how does that work? And another thing that popped into my head too is that, this is almost kind of like the debates in a shorter form, but they're mandatory. Like, imagine you have to go sit in a room and watch the debates, and that's how it works. But I guess you could shorten it down to being like a 30-minute commercial or something.
Maybe that's okay. They each have 30-minute commercial if it's two parties, but I hate that it's only two parties, by the way. But
well, yeah, again, that's the thing about doing this is just it's going to be freaking expensive, right?
Oh yeah, costly.
You've got a country of 300 million people, and you're wanting to put them all in a classroom for an hour and take a test. Someone's got to administer that. You're going to have pencils and paper. You're going to have screens. You got technology issues with this test. How are you going to manage all of that stuff?
You have a clicker or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, some kind of technology is going to have to take care of that, and someone's got to pay for that, and that someone is us, of course. So unless you got a way to fix that, snap your fingers in this new world, and it's provided. I don't know if you've got that kind of ability. But one thing that I'm thinking too is that there's going to be a lot of pushback here because this is what would be the modern argument is that, well, not everyone has the ability to travel to a classroom.
Yes, and every
it's a disability sort of thing. Oh, I'm hard of hearing. Your screen candidate speech thingamajig isn't loud enough. Like, you're infringing
And I
on
think
my...
we should. I think that's the... Yeah.
You're infringing on my rights because I can't hear this thing.
We're putting it on this volume, and if you can't hear... No, you're right, though. Like, we have to make this... To be clear of conscience, like, you have to, I think, make it, like, approachable for everyone. And that means, are you giving them rides if they can't make it to the place, but they still want to... Like, it's just... It gets...
Well, that brings up an interesting question. Like, in your voting world, do you think voting should be mandatory? I mean, like, so, in our current system, it's not.
I don't think it should be, and I also my idea that I was just tossing out there. The reason there's a really big part of me that objects is every layer, every loophole or hurdle you put in front of voting seems we should really be careful, like having to justify. I don't know. It can just be really like how many. I don't want to make it complicated. I mean, we already like voting the most. The 2008 election, I think I heard this on NPR recently, had like 62%, and that was the highest ever turnout.
Wow.
So
I mean,
in modern elections, so that's not very high. That's kind of surprised me on the numbers, I guess. And so if you now are making people take an hour-long course, let's see what that ends up being.
That's gonna drop it. It's gonna drop that number.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe for the best. The people who care enough are the ones weighing in.
Right. I mean, I guess that it's kind of a supply and demand sort of thing, right? Like if you if there's enough demand for things to change, then you'll go to the course and you'll do the time, so to speak.
And so Yeah. And so I guess I get disappointed in the fragility of all our humans, like collectively. Whenever you say something, it's like, here are the million problems with that. Like, because all we're talking about at the end of the day is like a human going and taking an hour-long course. But then when you expand that by like what 327 million or however big America is, like it just becomes so difficult. Not just logistically, but like what about people who can't hear or walk or whatever, and like what about intellectual disabilities? At what point do they lose? Like, how severe does it have to be to not have the right to vote? And like, I don't know, lots of questions. So,
well, I mean, is there any legitimate hurdle? You talk about we should be really careful about putting hurdles in place, but I mean, even in our modern times, there are hurdles to voting, and not everyone, but most people, I guess, seem to be okay with it. Like, for example, age. Like right now, the voting age is 18, and if you're not 18, can't vote. Like, is that where the number should be?
I tend to think that's okay. I mean, it's arbitrary. It's just super arbitrary in some ways. I do think.
Let me ask you this: if you have this knowledge course in place, is a 15-year-old who listens to this knowledge any less able than an 18-year-old or a 40-year-old with the knowledge? Does that change things?
I guess that's the difficulty, is that the younger you are, the more you're just going to probably mirror your parents, or at least not have figured yourself out. But that's such a philosophical statement, figured yourself out. Like, what's wrong with someone who's 16 who feels strongly one way, is willing to go to take the course? Like, what's wrong with allowing them to vote? I mean, it seems to me there's kids that are politically conscious and are passionate about it, and they are way more deserving of voting than someone who just says, "Wait, who are we voting for again? Who do my people tell me to vote for? Okay, I'll go do that." So I actually don't mind the juvenile vote as much, I suppose. Like, it might be misguided if it maybe, like, I don't know how young, though. How young do we get? And how are they ripe for anyway, go ahead.
Well, let me present a counterpoint to, what you talk about, you're for the juvenile vote. As devil's advocate, let me play this out. When you're 18, or certainly when you're older, you've experienced what being an American is. You've experienced taxation, you've experienced, representation, you've experienced how the policymakers have created law and policy based on, your votes, the politicians that have gone into power. You've been taxed, you may have had a job, you understand your participation as a citizen.
Pretty convincing point.
And when you're a kid, when you're 15 or 16, all the policy that you've experienced is set by your parents. It's not set by policymakers in Washington. It's set by your parents, and that's all you know. So you have a limited experience. In a way, you are less of a citizen than when you're older, because when you're older, you've actually participated in citizenship and a lot of aspects that when you're a kid you don't even bother with. And I say this, I've always been of the opinion that you don't have to be a member of a class or a group of people in order to understand the plight of that class or group of people. So even if you're a young kid, you can understand what it's like to be an older American. So maybe if you have that knowledge, you're still able. But at some point we have to set a line and say, okay, you got to be this old to vote. Otherwise, we'll have young kids trying to say they understand. And there's an argument to be made, I think, that maybe that line should be even higher than 18. I mean, think about it. Like the way that education and experience have changed now, kids. Like, a college degree is the new high school degree. A high school diploma is almost worthless now, and you have to have a college degree to do anything, or so they say. You have kids staying on their parents' insurance a lot longer. You have kids living at home, or even young adults living at home until their mid-20s or even later. How much longer does it take to get life experience now than back in the day? I think there's an argument to be made that maybe you should be even older than 18. What do you think about that? Or should it be like a sliding scale? If you're an experienced 16-year-old, should you be able to vote? And if you're an inexperienced 30-year-old, you should not? Or...
And it could change depending on culturally. If kids were moving out of the home at 16 and getting their real job at 16 and that sort of stuff, then we would be more inclined to say they should be voting at 16 because they're voting on policy that, shapes who we are as Americans or as whatever country.
So would you say that in your knowledge check and your knowledge test about the candidates and about policy and stuff, would you also include in there some sort of background check or experience check or something, so that if you're a 16-year-old with a lot of life experience, then
if they were emancipated legally or something like that,
yeah, maybe then they'd be allowed to
a real job.
Then they could vote. Like, is that something you'd be okay with?
I would, yes. So I think right now I would leave it at 18 because that's when they tend to. You're legally an adult. Like as a society, we have to kind of come up with an age, and we've arrived at 18. And so that's why I'm with the assumption that 18 is a decent age to say they've become an adult. Now they're legally an adult. Then you are. It kind of serves all the purposes you were just alluding to. Like, okay, now they're working in the real world. They're doing all this stuff. I mean, that's not perfect, but I'm fine. 18 just seems like a fine. Even in my snap my fingers thing right now, I'm kind of going to stick with 18 just for the sake of simplicity for a moment, right. And say like, okay, yeah, you got to be a certain age to vote. I can't just let you be 8 years old, pass this test and do this. Even 12, even an informed 15-year-old, that's a real, it can be an interesting age, right? The sort of, I know it all and I'm never going to change and these are my beliefs and that's how it is. And it's like, well, you haven't experienced what you're voting on. And so there's a need, if you're going to weigh in, you should have some skin in the game, so to speak. Like you're being affected by this. And yeah, they are, but only sort of tangentially or through their parents or whatever. So. All
right. So I'll ask, I mean, age is one hurdle. But there are other hurdles that we have, or I mean, I guess more specifically that we had in the past. Back in the 1800s, black people couldn't vote. Earlier women couldn't vote either. Is that something you would change, or
on race? No, and not gender or any of that. I mean, on citizenry, like you should weigh in if you're there's just common sense here, and I'm not trying to sound even political. It's just like a voting body should be you have to say here who we are. We are a body of people, and so that body of people gets to vote. Like this is, I'm talking very generally here, like without being too political. It's just like this is it. This is like these are who get to vote. It's the people who are members of our society, and like that there has to be some sort of official capacity. Like you could debate all day long about who pathways to citizenry and making that simpler or whatever. But I'm just talking about
Well, I mean, couldn't the argument be made that if you're talking about the body of Americans, and if you're part of this body, then you deserve the right to vote. Like, going back to the age thing, like isn't a teenager, a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, aren't they part of the body, and by that logic shouldn't they be allowed to vote?
Right, but again, they like their parents do get to vote because they're the ones sort of making the decisions for that household, and so if they could and should vote, I suppose. But the kids just haven't experienced the taxation or the policy or whatever. So it just like I think you just won me over with your argument that like, well, they aren't. They're not operating in the system yet. They're like being conditioned to operate in the system, and in some real ways they are, right? They're in the educational system, blah blah blah. But
yeah, I think I think that's actually my real position. I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'm doing devil's advocate, but I think I convinced myself with that one. So you bring up something interesting. You mentioned kids being part of a household. I was thinking about this, back in the day in the 1700s, I mentioned the freeholders, they had to have property in order to vote. And I wonder if, in a way, they aren't the representatives of their household. They have their wife and their kids and, their slaves back then and everything. But they were the only ones that could vote. But in a way, they were lending the vote of their household.
So what's the difference?
well, I mean, I think that, so an analogy might be in our modern day time. We have in the Senate the same number of representatives for every state, regardless of the state's size or population. So in a way, the group of people that makes up a state is represented by a smaller set that's not proportional to the population. So could you potentially consider one family representative able to vote? And most families tend to vote the same way anyway. Not all, but most tend to vote the same way. So could you have one representative?
I'd like to know if that's how true that is. I tend to agree, but I'd like to know how true that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't look it up, so I guess I can't say with 100% certainty. But I'm pretty sure that for the most part, families tend to vote the same. I guess at least until the kids move out. But so one thing that I was thinking here, but that brings up a question I had. In a way, doesn't a large family have more power than a small family since they have more voters? And so they're disproportionately represented?
It seems to naturally bear itself out if you have a family of 6 people, and those 6 people get to vote when they turn 18 anyway. And if you have a family of 2 people, like only 2 get to. I don't know. It seems nice and simple that like more people. If it's but you're saying in these situations, just like one collective vote of the household.
Well, let's see if I can explain this a little bit better. So I'm saying that, in our modern times, you might have a large family, a family of say 8 people or something, and they have more voting power than families with smaller number of people. So in a way, the power tends to larger families because they tend to vote more similarly, and so. If we had a representative by family,
well, why is that disproportionate? I don't get. It sounds proportionate. They have more voters, so more.
Well, it is disproportionate. There's a family of 8 has 2 times as many people as a family of 4. I mean, it is a proportion. It's proportional, but disproportionate. They do have outsized
these values. Yep.
They do have outsized weights. So parents that have larger families, they actually have more voting power than parents that have smaller families.
Yep. But that seems, you said disproportionate, and I don't mean to be too harp on semantics, but
well, it is disproportional.
Proportional though, is it?
No, proportional and proportionate they're different things. I mean, yet they are proportional because it's 4 and 8, but it's disproportionate because one's larger.
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that there is a power difference between those.
It is a proportion that seems to be just. There are 8 humans.
Well, so let's try to put it. Let's put it in a modern context. I don't know if my point is getting across. So there are real groups in America that have fewer kids. So for example, feminists, career women. They don't necessarily want to have kids, and so a power couple or something may have 1 or no kids. That's definitely a thing that exists. Meanwhile, there are religious communities like Christians, Catholics, or Jews and they have large families. They'll have 3, 4, 5, 8 kids or something like that. So the argument could be made that those families with those sets of values and desired voting policies have more power than families with fewer kids, and that's why I'm just throwing this idea about the representation system out there.
I mean, maybe, but that seems fine to me. Like if you have a group, if a group of people collectively feels a way that this is the way they want to be governed and they exercise their right, that this sort of the idea of a democracy, or at least a representative democracy, so they vote to say treat us this way. And so like if there are more of them that feel that way, they should be proportionally
fair enough. That's fine.
That way. I think I understand what you're saying about why that disproportionate, but it seems like a substantive difference. It's not just that the numbers are out of whack. They're justifiably, they're proportionally not out of whack. They're proportionally not equal because there are just more people that feel this way. And like I'm not angry or frustrated by a family instilling their values to their kids that then likely have those values growing up. It seems sort of, and they may or may not, by the way. This happens a lot, right? You can see the
I agree with you 100%. It's not like I'm advocating.
You were just trying to convince me otherwise. I just couldn't get there.
Right. Well, so the key component is that most families tend to vote the same way. So you talk about it's just and everyone votes the way they feel, but in a way it's not an individual system if you're being influenced by your parents. So that's the only point that I'm trying to make, is that maybe there isn't as much individuality. A cynic might say that people have lots of kids to influence policy.
But have we inadvertently made a case for perhaps the popular vote, in that the downside is like, okay, here's the tendencies in voting, right? You get groupthink. So if a city is liberal and like an inner city is liberal and the outskirts of cities are more conservative or whatever, so you got groups of people. And then groupthink happens, and they vote a certain way, and that's what we're sort of saying with families on the microcosmic level. Like, so, there does seem to be a problem. Well, like, what's the case against the popular vote? I'd like to hear, because to me, there's something simple and just, like, seems just, like the number of votes go in this direction. It has to do with campaigning, right? And like flyover state gets okay.
Well, so, kind of. In a way, it kind of does have to do with that, but it really gets us back to electoral college discussion, and you kind of brought us back around to that.
Yeah, and I didn't really mean to, but it seems I get what you're saying earlier about it all. Yeah, it all
kind of comes together. So let me see if I can try to explain to you why pure popular vote, a pure democracy, isn't the best system, and this is something that's been talked about lots of times, and you've probably heard the phrase tyranny of the majority. And that's what it is. It's that you could potentially end up with a system where 50.001% of the population gets to make the rules for the entire population, and that 49.999% of the population essentially has no say, because when everyone raises their hand and says, this is what I vote for, one more person votes for the other laws, and everyone has to abide by them. And you might say, oh, that's democracy, that's just, but if you have a system where continually the majority gets to impose their will on the minority without representation, that's where it really becomes an issue, is that if you're getting laws made that influence you and you don't have representation because the other side is always winning a democratic vote, then that's the issue.
That makes some degree of sense. With our elections that alternate, and are you just saying that if a country gets to be right-leaning or left-leaning clearly, then we're just going to have that party dominate forever? Or is that the danger of that? Or?
That is a danger, is that, you could have one side that just dominates the other, and that's a recipe for disaster. So imagine you're in your classroom and you have to decide what books. You allow your students to decide what books they're going to read for the rest of the year. And you happen to, for whatever reason, have the football team in your class. So you have 10 football players in your class, and then the rest of the class are girls. And when the vote comes up for what you have 10 boys and 9 girls, and when the vote comes up for what books to vote on, the football team always votes for like Dracula or some more action-packed book, and the girls vote for Jane Eyre or something. And you say, oh, let's just take a vote, democracy, and the 10 boys raise their hand for Dracula, and you're just always reading Dracula, and you're never going to get to Jane Eyre because you decided to go with democracy. I mean, it may be a good thing not to go with Jane Eyre. That's not the argument I'm making, but I mean, the football players would probably be right in this instance. But the fact of the matter is they would get to cram down their desires on the entire classroom simply because they have the majority vote. And that does actually get into electoral college stuff. So do you actually remember how the electoral college works? Have you read about any of that?
Not on the spot, certainly. but like even it's interesting because the electoral college, when else does it come into play other than the presidential election and choosing basically one of two candidates? Is this when it comes into play? Is this it?
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. Just for the president and vice president. It's a really weird kind of system. Basically what it is there are these set of electors who are appointed, I think it's by the state legislature, and if in an election a state, the popular vote goes one way, say a Republican wins a state, then the Republican electors get to cast their individual votes for who wins, and they can choose whether to vote for their candidate or not. Actually, they can choose to vote against their candidate.
And vote their conscience or whatever.
Yeah, they could vote their conscience, so to speak. And it's actually, those are called faithless voters if they vote against their party nominee. And interestingly, one thing that I read is that in 2016, 10 electoral voters actually were faithless voters. They didn't vote with their party. They're actually Democrats. That were most of them.
They went toward Trump.
No. They didn't vote for Trump. They voted for like Bernie Sanders.
Oh, back something. In the okay.
Yeah. Okay. But the point is, they didn't vote for their candidate. But it's important to note, at least thus far, no faithless voter, no elector who voted against this party has shifted the outcome of any U.S. election so far. But the possibility is there, and I always thought that was a weird thing to have in the system. There's this opportunity for these electors potentially to change the outcome of an election. Now, some states have laws that say you have to vote a certain way. You can't vote against your ticket for the other candidate. Some states they don't have winner takes all, as they call it, like Maine. I think if a certain district is won, each district gets to vote with their party. So you could have Democratic and Republican electors both casting a vote in Maine. I think Nebraska is the same way. But even with that, it's still kind of crazy, or it seems crazy anyway, that you could have these people that, the small group of people could be the ones to turn things around. Hasn't happened so far, but they could potentially turn things around in a big way. I kind of wonder what would happen there.
I know. It's one final checks and balance to see if the population has lost their mind is the idea, or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, pretty much in American government, if things sound weird or convoluted, then you can almost guarantee that it's a checks and balances sort of thing. I mean, there are so many fail-safes in place to keep people from running away with power, which ultimately is a good thing. And that's kind of why they say that we're a country of gridlock, but that gridlock keeps it from becoming tyranny or keeps it from falling apart. So as frustrating as it can be to see things not get done, in many ways, not getting things done is the best thing for the country.
Yeah, that certainly doesn't make total sense. I don't know.
It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but but it keeps you from devolving into chaos. And so that's my personal opinion is that it's the gridlock is a good thing, and that's kind of part of what the country was, what they had in mind when they founded the country as well. But as far as the Electoral College goes, the key component is not that you just have these dudes casting votes willy nilly. It's the number of electors that each state has, and that's where the representation thing comes in, and that's why it's not pure democracy, because states with a big population, they have they have a lot of electors because of their population, but even small states with a tiny population still have a significant number of electoral votes, and that means that you don't have a situation where California and New York, which have very large populations and very uniform political leanings, they don't dominate the policy of the country, and you have states in the middle of the country who are very different culturally than states on the coast, and it's not right for the policy of some states that are very different to dictate the lives of people in the other states. That's kind of the idea. That's the basic pitch behind the Electoral College and the federalist system, and the kind of representation that they have. So it's a really interesting system, and it seems convoluted, and it seems like one of these things that's just kind of a hack job compromise that they threw in there. And I wonder if there's a way that you could have the best of both worlds, but I don't know. I think that might be something that's kind of beyond our abilities, at least beyond mine, as I'm walking around outside.
It's a headache when I start thinking about all of this, though.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Bless you. So why don't we just move along from Electoral College stuff to kind of the nitty-gritty individual process. So, like when I voted early and in person, and the process was it was pretty quick and easy, but still interesting. So the way it worked is I went to like a local gym, community center, and they handed me this nice complimentary pen. I had to go tell them who I was. They pulled up my registration, gave me a form. I signed the form, handed that form to someone else. They gave me a ballot. And then I took the ballot, went to this little booth, filled in the circles next to the people I was voting for, and took the ballot, put it in a box, an automated box, and got a sticker.
The paper thing seems so antiquated. Like, come on, is there really not a secure way to just clearly vote digitally?
Right. Well, I mean, it's easy to try to imagine, anyway, some sort of vote.gov website where you can, go vote, or some sort of voting app that you can download and vote. But, there are a lot of security concerns with something like that. Even though it may be easier, it's,
And then why not do some sort of facial... Most computers have cameras, and if you don't have access to a computer with a camera, you can go to your library or whatever voting poll place, whatever. They can go do it in person. But why not, say, I don't know. I could just be... I get there's a lot of issues with facial recognition and stuff, too. And that could be eerie, I guess. And it might not be private. I guess there's all sorts of suspicious reasons, but I don't know.
Well, the thing is that, when you think about it, we trust the internet with our banking data and our social data and all kinds of things. Why can't we trust it for voting?
It seems obvious. We rely on it for our livelihood and our finances and our everything. But all of a sudden voting, we can't do it. Just can't do it. Like, what? Something weird about that.
Yeah. There are three things that I can think of, three kind of areas that might kind of speak against doing some sort of very simple, convenient online voting. The first one we've kind of alluded to, which is security. In the private sector, security is pretty good. We trust our banks to handle online banking. At least most people do. We trust, online purchases and everything. But that's the private sector. The public sector and government, they lag behind in everything. I don't know that I would trust my information to a government-secured website or app And especially when it has to function for 300 million people. Like, I think there's a lot of risk in that, and it obviously becomes a target for bad actors, either domestic or foreign. So it's a concern just from the system design standpoint. Like, it's going to be hard for someone in a foreign country to hack, the paper ballots in a ballot box. It just can't be done. But it becomes possible for people outside our borders to mess with a digital system. The other thing that I can think of that might kind of be bad, might speak against doing this sort of thing, is the convenience. Like, we spend a lot of time talking about how, in the past there were arguments for you need to have knowledge of your candidates. You need to know what you're voting for and why. And if you simplify down the voting process into just an app, you pull up an app, you click a button real quick, that takes a lot of the effort out of it. In an odd way, it's good to have to put in some effort to actually cast your vote. I know some people probably think that sounds crazy, but I think treating it as a super casual affair removes some of the gravity of your duty as a citizen. Maybe that's just me, but that's what comes to mind there. And the third thing that I think of is, but it may be more easy to influence people's votes. Like, if you don't have to actually go to a public place like a gym or your community center or whatever, you don't have to actually go to one of these places. You could be doing it in your home. You could be sitting at your table and say, oh yeah, I need to vote. And then whoever happens to be around you, friends or family members or whatever, they're right there influencing your vote, whether consciously and overtly or subconsciously with peer pressure. Like, you're being influenced. I mean, you could even imagine wild scenarios where someone is actually coercing you. They say, pull out your app and vote for my candidate. Blah. And it sounds ridiculous, but that's a possibility. But I worry more about the group coercion.
Vote parties, and imagine that there'd be vote parties. Not like you actually throw a party and everyone agrees they're voting for whatever the party is for, and I don't like that. So you go and everyone watches you vote possibly, and you just you could see that's part of the vote party. So they put you on the screen. You get up on the music's blaring. You get up and it's projected your screen, and I could just see that. So.
Oh yeah, the peer pressure would be crazy.
And it's just I don't know. I do think privacy is good because I don't think it's cowardly at the end of the day. It's an interesting thought, but we need to be able to go vote how our conscience and not be fearful of sort of repercussions. And so go be able to vote. I think that's just important.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like we were saying, they had the big parties and congregations of people shouting out their votes, and you have to imagine that there's a lot of peer pressure in that kind of situation. And I think whenever you have some big group conversation like that, the good thing is you're going to get some cross-pollination of ideas and discussion.
Yes.
But that's with a reasonable sized group. Now we have 300 million people having that.
That's what social media has become. Everyone's having a conversation, and that hasn't been a great experiment so far.
No, it's been terrible. It's terrible. People talk all over each other. No one does their due diligence looking up things or presenting facts. It's just emotional crap. Yep. I think that would be a horrible idea.
So we just don't know what to do, but we know that paper ballots seem odd.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I wonder if there's any, I don't know.
And all the trees, man.
Yeah, poor trees dying, getting chopped down just for our ballots. A lot of people are writing in Kanye and stuff, so just a total sacrifice. So it wasn't just trees at my place. They were handing out pens.
Does it say I voted on it?
No, it had it's like a web address. I think it was like my Board of Elections or something. So okay. not even interesting.
Yeah.
So I got two other things that I want to ask. We're kind of getting down to the wire here, but what do you think about? So should people be allowed to sell their vote first, and then the second one? Do you think that it would be acceptable to have some sort of poll tax? You have to pay in order to vote.
So my obvious knee jerk is no way, but let me think about why. I mean, it, you should not be able to sell your vote because, well, just because it's so ripe.
Yeah.
I mean, I could just then people are going to buy elections, and that's a bad thing. And then, I mean, that's enough for me. The idea of buying elections because people have their prices and at different points, and I don't want the will of some. I don't want us to be subject to the will of random people who may or may not have strong wills. So no on the selling. What was the other one?
A poll tax, having to pay a tax to vote.
Yeah, no, I mean that just gets into. I mean, I'd like to think that $5 or whatever it wouldn't break the bank for people, but we're really introducing some. I can't get behind that. I don't know. It just shouldn't. This should be not related to your ability to pay for it, and like, there's something gross about them making a bunch of money on it.
So if it's not moral to tax at the polls because it's something that everyone should be able to do, why is it moral to tax food?
I'm not I guess I'm not sure that it is moral to tax food.
Yeah, I mean, what does buying food have to do with the government? Why put a barrier?
Why is it moral for a government to say, I'm going to take a little bit of that? I mean, on some big grand way, they could say, we've created this system in which y'all came together, and so we're going to take a little piece of that. Like you wouldn't have, if it weren't our roads that you took to get here, and if it weren't our blah blah blah. So we're going to take a little piece, but then tax the roads. Like I don't know. That seems.
But doesn't that same thing apply to voting?
I guess so. That's why I have a hard time justifying it.
Right.
Particularly food or like life sustaining, and
or like your job when people tax your income.
Job.
Yeah, it's like this is an arrangement.
Taking some of my livelihood.
Yeah.
It's weird. You're taking it from me then, and then you're taking it when I go to buy things, and then you take it from me when I die.
Well, I've never understood the justification for like an income tax. It just seems bizarre to me that an arrangement between me and someone else, in exchange of goods or services, that why is the government involved at all? Like, why do we both have to take some of this money and transfer it to a third party? That doesn't make any sense to me. That just seems so bizarre.
I guess that's the thing. It doesn't. It just feels normal, and we accept it, but it's not necessarily.
It doesn't make sense.
Moral or logical. It's just normal.
Yeah, well, we become accustomed to some of these built-in things, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. Like, we just become accustomed to the weirdness of voting, and maybe taxation is something that should be re-examined. I mean, we're taxed in dozens and dozens of ways, and everyone's just like, that's the way it is. But when you think about it, why is my business the government's business? That doesn't make any sense. But I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
But it's worth thinking about that.
Yeah. So we're kind of at the end here. We've gone through a ton of this stuff. I'm sure there's a ton more we could get to. I do have one last one that kind of occurred to me because there's a lot of hoopla about voting deadlines and everything going on right now. In your ideal voting world, would you have voting deadlines?
Of course.
Would there be a due date?
You have to.
Right.
I mean, there's got to be an election on a day, and that's unavoidable. Like time, there has to be deadlines on every single thing we do in some way. If you don't eat food at some point, you die. Like there are consequences. Like I don't know what to say about that. Like I'm not saying it's perfect, and I get that there could be some my vote wasn't counted or whatever, but I feel like I've been so bombarded as someone who's not particularly political. I've been so bombarded with reminders that
Shut up.
I just don't have that much. Like, okay, there has to be due dates or deadlines. Just has to be in any educational format. It's like, all right, here's a paper and here's when it's gonna be due, or here's a test and this is when it's gonna happen. Like, even that, like people could. I mean, can you imagine arguments? I can't. That's so timist or something like that. Like your assumption that I'm able to get to meet your demands in this time structure is unreasonable. It's like, well, I don't like this is how the world exists. Like it's all about saying I got to meet you here at this time. In order to function, we're operating on the same wavelength in time. Like we just have to agree to stuff. Yeah. I don't. That's sort of a rant, but like, geez, yes,
I agree with that.
There has to be I can't even like entertain the idea that like, no, you can vote in 4 years for Obama or something. like what? Like, no, it just doesn't. It falls apart so quickly logically.
Yeah, I mean, if you know the deadline, then hit the deadline.
Yep. And there's always going to be issues right up at the barrier, by the way. There's always going to be issues of like, well, I voted like the night of and sent it in the last and it didn't quite make it or something. It's like, well, okay, sorry. I don't know. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's imperfect. And that's why 5 minutes early can sometimes be 5 minutes late, you know? Like, you're supposed to show up with, if it matters to you enough, then do it, and do it with time to spare.
Yeah. So, well,
that's a good way to end.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps things up. We got a long one this time.
That's enough.
Yep.
Do. It's over.
That's it at the end. All right, so that was it. Yeah, this is a post-podcast message. You get 2 Bennett-only messages here today. But, hopefully that was acceptable. Maybe if I didn't tell you at the beginning, you wouldn't have known that I wasn't there doing it live. So, I think I did a decent job acting as myself. I don't want to do it again, though. It was kind of a pain. In the couple of days that I was re-recording this, I think I tracked down the audio problem I was having, and it was a defective wire. Not my fault. It wasn't my fault. A defective wire. So I'm getting it replaced. Maybe I'll try a Walkabout podcast again in the future, but I'm kind of scared about it now. So we will find out. But if you made it all the way through that, thank you for listening. And since Daniel's not here to roll his eyes and sigh, I'll mention again that Third Space Podcast, we have a YouTube channel. You can find the podcast all uploaded on YouTube if you prefer. And you can also contact us at mail.thirdspace@gmail.com. You know it's professional because it's a Gmail address. So if you have questions, comments, feedback, anything, feel free to reach out. And that's it, for real. Dun, 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 dun.